we found every Easter egg in Robert Zemeckis' 1985 classic, Back to the Future.
You're gonna see some serious
From references found before Marty goes back in time, to references to real historical events and film canon found throughout Marty's time in the 50s. And you know, I gotta say, it's a good thing that this movie, to me anyway, is endlessly rewatchable because we had to watch it like a dozen times. Admittedly, some of those were for research and some of them were just for our own enjoyment. But it truly is one of those movies that rewards you for rewatching it because you will discover new little things and connections to other things every single time. For example, have you seen the movie Orgy American Style?
I don't know what it is.
Well, not only is that movie hidden in the background of this movie, but you can also see one of the actors from that movie in this movie. I'm telling y'all, there is levels to this shit. So, if you love Back to the Future, and let's face it, you do, then take in this Easter egg hunt of epic proportions, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
When it comes to the most durable pop movies that not only hold up incredibly well, but truly defy aging and get better over time, the appreciable value of Robert Zemeckis' Back to the Future is hard to beat. Indeed, with the film celebrating its 40th anniversary in 2025, there is still no shortage of discoverable tidbits, buried Easter eggs, and fascinating trivia associated with the landmark sci-fi teen time travel adventure. Much of the movie's hidden audiovisual treasure trove derives from what ranks among the finest screenplays ever written, with Zemeckis and Bob Gale carefully crafting meticulous details and subtle clues, hints, references, and affectionate homages to pop culture's past and present. The result is a vivid paragon of franchise world-building, with several peripheral nuances reinforcing the themes of Marty McFly and Doc Brown's story while commenting on the societal mores of the 1950s and 1980s. In other words, Back to the Future's vast menagerie of Easter eggs serves a narrative function. By paying heartfelt tribute to everything from The Time Machine and The Twilight Zone to Star Trek and Star Wars, among many other science fiction time travel stories, the movie subliminally underscores Marty's quest to seize the day and forge his own future to the best of his ability. Not buying it? Well, dust off the DeLorean and rev that sumbitch to 88 miles per hour and crank up the power of love. It's time to go back to the future once again. Okay, so the visual motif of half-hidden Easter eggs begins in Back to the Future's famous opening shot. As the credits start and the camera pans across Doc Brown's collection of clocks, you'll notice one model with a figurine of a man resembling Doc dangling from a clock hand. This not only subtly foreshadows the climactic finale in which Doc will do the same to help return Marty McFly to 1985, but it's also a sly reference to Harold Lloyd's character in the 1923 action comedy Safety Last. More cinematic allusions abound in the opening scene. When Marty plugs his guitar into the amplifier that Doc later warns him not to use, the alphanumeric code CRM114 is displayed on the amp, highlighted in red. First used in the classic 1964 doomsday farce Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick continually referenced CRM114 throughout his filmography. While it's obvious that Zemeckis was fond of Kubrick's work, Kubrick later repaid the favor by giving the highest compliments to Zemeckis' Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the, quote, incredible amount of back-breaking work, unquote, to weave animation and live action so seamlessly with state-of-the-art technology. Not for nothing, but the image of Stanley Kubrick watching Roger Rabbit is pretty damn amusing. Okay, so sticking with the movie theme, the next cinematic reference in Back to the Future comes in Hill Valley's town square in 1985, where Marty meets his girlfriend, Jennifer. Partially in focus in the background is a movie theater marquee advertising the 1973 quasi-adult comedy film Orgy American Style. What many people don't realize is that the bum, Red, whom Marty greets on the sidewalk bench as he returns to 1985 at the end of the movie, is the actor George Buck Flower, the star of Orgy American Style. While the easily missable detail is meant to depict how sick and depraved society has become since the so-called innocent era of the 1950s, it's also a cool little homage to George Buck Flower. Many fans have theorized that the bum on the bench is the former Hill Valley mayor, Red Thompson. However, Bob Gale has since disputed this. Sticking with the Hill Valley Town Square sequence, the location was filmed at the famous Courthouse Square set on the Universal Studios backlot in Southern California. In addition to experiencing multiple fires during its existence, The town square featuring the iconic clock tower is the same Universal set that served as the setting of Kingston Falls, the fictional town featured in Joe Dante's Gremlins. Of course, Frances Lee McCain, who plays Lorraine's mother in Back to the Future, also played Billy's mother, Lynn, in Gremlins. Further tying the two pop 80s movies together, if you look closely, Doc sports a large Gremlins notepad on his hip, attached to the left side of his belt, when he first meets Marty at Twin Pines Mall. What's funnier, Kubrick watching Roger Rabbit, or Doc being a Gremlins fan? Believe it or not, the two feline statues seen surrounding the tower clock were unused props, recycled from Paul Schrader's horror movie Cat People, also released by Universal 3 years before Back to the Future. Right as Marty leaves 1955 in the DeLorean, another movie theater marquee displays a much different period-appropriate release as fiery tire streaks are left behind. Eagle-eyed fans can spot the title The Atomic Kid, the 1954 Mickey Rooney sci-fi comedy about a uranium prospector who gains radioactive superpowers after being exposed to an atomic blast. Of course, this refers to Doc Brown and his plutonium experiments, and Marty's time-traveling superpowers afforded by the DeLorean. If you look closely, the Atomic Kid billboard can still be briefly seen when Marty returns to Hill Valley in 1985, before it suddenly turns into an Assembly of Christ church. By the way, while the town name of Hill Valley was a deliberate oxymoron created by Galen Zemeckis, the word DeLorean translates to "from the hills" in Romanian. Over time, much has been made about Back to the Future's play on the Shaggy Dog, the 1959 Disney movie that concerns a young boy gaining superpowers that turn him into an old English sheepdog, a similar breed of dog to Einstein's Catalan sheepdog in Back to the Future. For those wondering, Tiger was the real name of the dog that played Einstein. For long shots of Einstein driving the DeLorean, stuntmen dressed in a dog costume are used, the same process used in The Shaggy Dog. Ironically, despite Dave McFly sporting a Mickey Mouse shirt in Marty's photograph, Disney famously passed on Back to the Future and publicly regretted the decision. Not for nothing, but most studios declined the film, and the script was rejected 44 times. Oddly enough, the inciting date of November 5th, 1955 has been used in other time travel movies. In addition to being the date that Doc invented time travel in Back to the Future, November 5th featured prominently as the time travel entry date in the 1975 movie Time After Time and the 1982 movie Time Rider, The Adventures of Lyle Swan. November 5th is also the birthday of Bob Gale's father. As legend has it, Gale conceived the idea of Back to the Future after looking at his father's high school yearbook and wondering, if he went back in time, would he be friends with his father? Of course, overarching allusions to H.G. Wells' The Time Machine have long been linked to Back to the Future, such as the color-coded DeLorean display readout. However, the movie leans more into its array of television influences. For instance, when Marty first enters the 1955 time frame, he immediately runs over one of Mr. Peabody's pine trees. Hence the change from Twin Pines Mall in 1955 to Lone Pine Mall in 1985. Mr. Peabody's son in the film is named Sherman, an overt nod to the animated duo Peabody and Sherman from the Rocky and Bullwinkle TV show. As some fans are aware, the segment Mr. Peabody's Improbable History features a storyline involving the genius canine Mr. Peabody and his adopted son, Sherman, traveling through time on the Wayback Machine. With clear tributes to Star Trek's Vulcans, the most noticeable small-screen parallel correlates with the very first episode of Rod Serling's classic horror sci-fi anthology series, The Twilight Zone. The story, Where Is Everybody?, features a young man who wanders through a completely foreign town with no memory of who he is or how he got there. He walks into a diner with a jukebox and accidentally breaks a clock, thinking he is in a dream. Beyond the story similarities to Marty's disorienting adventure, scored to the Four Aces' Mr. Sandman, Where Is Everybody was filmed at the Courthouse Square at Universal Studios, the same setting as Hill Valley's Town Square in Back to the Future. Early in the 1985 timeline, when George McFly laughs hysterically at the Honeymooners episode, The Man from Space, notice the board game Life sitting right next to the TV set. The entire plot of Back to the Future can be read as a game of life, toying with the existential outcomes based on steps taken and moves made in the past and present. Beyond the slew of movie and TV Easter eggs, Back to the Future's music is littered with cool trivia tidbits. Beginning with the most famous example, Huey Lewis, whose Oscar-nominated opening song, The Power of Love, perfectly sets the tone of the film, makes a hilarious cameo as the uptight authority who yells at Marty through a megaphone for his music being, quote, too darn loud during the Battle of the Bands audition. The irony is that Marty is performing Huey Lewis and the News' The Power of Love, meaning Huey is grousing about his own band's creation. Of course, the band's track, Back in Time, also features prominently in the film, adding infinite pop cultural cachet. The band recorded a third song for the film, titled In the Nick of Time, but it was discarded and used in the 1985 Richard Pryor comedy Brewster's Millions instead. In the same audition scene with his band The Pinheads, the bass player holding a red guitar on Marty's right side is Michael J. Fox's guitar instructor, Paul Hansen. Among the most memorable music sequences in the movie comes when Marty poses as Darth Vader and mercilessly blares heavy metal into George's ear while he's asleep in bed. A close-up of the cassette placed in the Walkman reads, Edward Van Halen. Although the rock band Van Halen denied Back to the Future the rights to use its music, guitarist Eddie Van Halen circumvented the legal process and contributed music anyway. Although Eddie Van Halen created and performed a recorded guitar riff that nearly melts George's brain, in actuality, he recorded the instrumental for the 1984 movie The Wildlife, also starring Leah Thompson and Eric Stoltz. Of course, Stoltz was famously replaced by Fox after 6 weeks of filming when Zemeckis and Gale deemed his performance way too serious for the role. When the music from the song Out the Window went unused in The Wildlife, Van Halen granted permission for Back to the Future to use it. As for the anachronistic hairdryer tucked in Marty's waistband during the scene, it's neither a goof nor an Easter egg. It is one of the items from the 1980s that Doc left in the DeLorean, which is explained in a deleted scene. An extended deleted sequence shows Marty blasting George with the hairdryer, further frightening his father and forcing him to ask Lorraine out to the dance. Meanwhile, while many assume Michael J. Fox sings in the film, in actuality it was Jack Mack and Heart Attack lead singer Mark Campbell filling in for Fox. Although Campbell was not credited, he earned a percentage of the soundtrack's sales for his contributions. Past the litany of movie, music, and television references, Back to the Future has no shortage of fun and fascinating literary links. One excellent example is seen when Marty crashes into Old Man Peabody's barn. Peabody's son hands him an EC comic from the 1950s titled Tales from Space. While completely fictional, the lettering and title design of the comic's cover art are reminiscent of several horror and sci-fi comics of the time, including Tales from the Crypt. Remember, Robert Zemeckis produced HBO's Tales from the Crypt horror anthology, which launched 4 years after Back to the Future was released. Also in the 1955 timeline, viewers can spot an Amazing Stories comic lying on George's bedside table. Amazing Stories was a real science fiction comic created in 1926, but also alludes to the vastly overlooked Steven Spielberg sci-fi anthology series of the same name, which debuted on NBC 2 months after Back to the Future hit theaters. As you know, Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment produced the Back to the Future franchise. In Lou's Cafe, George reads the real-life magazine Weird Science number 15. Coincidentally, John Hughes' classic teen comedy Weird Science was released in August 1985, 5 weeks after Back to the Future. Both films were distributed by, you guessed it, Universal Pictures. Others have noted literary parallels between Marty McFly and Hank Morgan, the young man who can ostensibly travel through time in Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Others have equated Doc Brown with King Arthur from the same story. In Marty's bedroom at the beginning, a large photo can be seen on the wall featuring him and his siblings. It's the same photo that Marty uses to show Doc that his family is being erased from existence due to the time travel paradox. Another overlooked detail happens when Marty first arrives at school at the beginning of the movie. Scrawled in graffiti on the right side of the building entrance are the words, Lorraine de Calvin. Many have interpreted this as a subtle in-joke referencing Lorraine's fondness for Marty, whom she mistakes for Calvin Klein after reading the brand on his underwear. In France, Marty's underwear brand was changed to Pierre Cardin. In Spain, it was altered to Levi Strauss. When Doc sends Einstein 1 minute into the future, he times the process on 2 separate stopwatches. The time elapsed between Einstein's exit and re-entry is 1 minute and 21 seconds, the same as the time of re-entry at 1:21 a.m. While many fans have suggested this is an overt nod to Doc's tirade about 1.21 gigawatts, Bob Gale has insisted it's a coincidence. Another obscure background visual can be spotted when Marty arrives at Doc's garage in 1955, where the DeLorean is stored. On the wall, a blueprint for the large brainwave analyzer that Doc wears on his head as he tries to predict what Marty is thinking. It can be spotted behind Marty's head right before Doc hands him the model car to wind up for demonstration. Notice in the same scene how Doc wears a watch on both wrists. Less of an Easter egg and more of a hilarious aside, Zemeckis and his crew pulled a prank on Michael J. Fox while filming the scene with Marty and Lorraine parked outside the school dance. In the scene, Marty yanks a booze bottle from Lorraine before taking a sip himself. Although water is used for most takes, during one instance, Zemeckis had real alcohol substituted without telling Fox. When the cameras rolled and Fox took a sip of real alcohol, he burst out with a shocked grin and began laughing. Although the take was not used in the final film, the footage can be seen on the DVD outtakes. One of the most pertinent storytelling sight gags occurs right before Marty goes back to the future. On the right-hand side of the street next to the Bank of America, a storefront for Ask Mr. Foster Travel Service is prominently displayed above the power cable. Above the storefront is another sign that reads, "Time to travel? Ask Mr. Foster Travel Service," with a clock reading a few minutes after 10 p.m. Ask Mr. Foster was not only a real travel agency founded in 1888, but the clock is also set to the time lightning will strike the clock tower and send Marty home. It's a quick, blink and you'll miss it moment, with the time and words time travel subliminally washing over viewers in nanoseconds. Speaking of Marty's race back to 1985, when he returns from the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, Doc tells Marty that there are exactly 7 minutes and 22 seconds before the lightning strikes the clock tower. From that moment on, precisely 7 minutes and 22 seconds of real time elapse on screen before Marty returns home safely in the film. As alluded to, the most well-known Easter egg in the movie appears when Marty first meets Doc at the mall parking lot, with a sign reading Twin Pines Mall visible on screen. This sign is changed to Lone Pine Mall in the alternative version of 1985, after Marty ran over Mr. Peabody's pine tree in 1955. This is one of several easily missable sight gags and background visual clues that add subtle storytelling detail. Similarly, when Marty returns to 1985, the ledge that Doc broke on the clock tower while trying to connect the power cable can be seen, alluding to the fact that it has not been repaired since that fateful night in 1955. The broken ledge is not present in the original 1985 timeline. Still, it is in the alternate version, highlighting how Doc and Marty redirected the course of events that changed their lives forever. Speaking of alternate realities, once George defeats Biff, wins Lorraine's heart, and forges a much brighter future for himself as a sci-fi author, his change in preferred beer reinforces his improved transformation. At the start of the film, George is seen drinking Miller Lite. In the end, when Doc rummages through the McFly's trash can looking for fuel, a can of Miller High Life, aka the champagne of beers, can be spotted. The implication is that George is now living the high life after reaching his full potential. It's granular details like these that make Back to the Future such a treasure to watch, and why it's held up so well for the last 40 years. Alright, the last bit of business relates to several on-screen cast and crew shoutouts in Back to the Future. For instance, the man driving the Jeep that Marty rides behind on his skateboard at the beginning of the movie is stunt coordinator Walter Scott. Moments later, a car in a parking lot is seen with the license plate reading, "For Mary." This is a shout out to Mary T. Radford, the personal assistant of Frank Marshall, the film's first assistant director. Later, when Doc and Marty visit Hill Valley High School, a prominent sign hanging in the hallway reads, "Ron Woodward for Senior Class President." This is a nod to Ron Woodward, who served as the key grip for Back to the Future and Zemeckis' previous film, Romancing the Stone. Finally, when Marty provokes Biff and escapes on his skateboard, Biff and his cronies run into a manure truck. The name D. Jones Manure Hauling is stamped on the truck. This is a reference to Dennis E. Jones, one of the movie's unit production managers. As you can see, Back to the Future's immense wealth of discoverable Easter eggs helps to reinforce the movie's time travel themes, alluding to several pop culture references from the 1950s and the 1980s. It's these brilliantly conceived storytelling details that subliminally convey Doc and Marty's existential adventure in ways that appreciate the movie's value and undeniable staying power. It's also why the movie was the biggest box office hit of 1985, and why it remained number one at the box office for 3 straight months. It's also the reason why Gale and Zemeckis have vowed never to permit a franchise sequel, remake, or reboot in their lifetimes. Indeed, the grand irony of Back to the Future, A movie about the passage of time is that it remains timeless 40 years after its release.
Sprinkle the moonlight soft on my bed. Whisper a story, dance.
You know, the completionist in me says that if you're gonna do an Easter egg hunt for one Back to the Future movie, get ready to do all three of them. And Back to the Future 2 has maybe more Easter eggs than the last film. In fact, this one might have the most out of all of them. Like, on a meta level, there's a scene where Michael J. Fox can be seen in the diner, and in the background you can see TV shows playing like Taxi, which stars Christopher Lloyd, and Family Ties, which stars Marty McFly himself. That's Robert Zemeckis doing meta before it was even cool. So once again, we are back for another epic Easter egg hunt, and this time we're gonna be going back to the future to the past. We're gonna be going back to the future and then back. So let's all get on the proverbial hoverboard and skate our way back to the future. I really feel like watching that movie so many times has ruined my ability to just say words, just say things. So let's pass it over to Travis and get into it.
When thinking about the most successful and entertaining cinematic sequels on record, Robert Zemeckis' Back to the Future Part 2 instantly leaps to mind.
What the hell is going on here?
Filmed back-to-back with Back to the Future Part 3 after 2 years of script writing and set construction, the grand irony is that Zemeckis never initially intended to make a sequel, much less two, to his landmark 1985 teen time travel adventure. Looking back, it's hard to imagine the success of one franchise entry without the other.
I'm gonna fly! Don't go anywhere! You're next!
With Back to the Future ranking as arguably the finest movie trilogy ever made. Of course, just as we did with the first film and plan to do with the last, it's only right that we go back in time to pour through Back to the Future Part 2 and take you guys and gals on a hidden Easter egg hunt.
Bulletproof vest! Great flick! Great friggin' flick!
You know what to do. Fire up the hoverboard, strap on the Nike mags, shotgun a Pepsi Perfect, and throw on the futuristic Doc Brown goggles. We've got some heavy digging to do.
Great Scott!
Okay, so by now, it's fairly common knowledge that the opening of Back to the Future Part 2, which recreates the ending of the original movie as Doc Brown, Marty McFly, and Jennifer Parker fly off in the DeLorean, had to undergo a frame-by-frame reshoot. This was done to replace Claudia Wells, who originally played Jennifer Parker, with Elizabeth Shue. Wells had to decline reprising the role after her mother became ill with cancer. While the painstaking efforts to completely mirror the original ending in the sequel cannot be overstated, most fans of the franchise are aware of Shue replacing Wells. However, most fans probably do not realize that the shots of the DeLorean flying through the stormy clouds as the credits roll in Back to the Future Part 2 were filmed for Clint Eastwood's 1982 film Firefox, the first of many Eastwood connections to the franchise that we'll touch on later. Once Doc tells Marty and Jennifer that their children are in danger of becoming criminals and need a future intervention, they whisk off to the year 2015. One of the first things viewers may easily miss is the newfangled floating Hill Valley sign, welcoming visitors. Notice how Goldie Wilson's son, Goldie Wilson Jr., has followed in his father's footsteps and become the town mayor. The Skyway sign also features the taglines, "A great place to live," and "Please fly safely. Ejector seats save lives," both of which recall the original movie, indicating how flying cars had become a common sight. As Marty wanders around Hill Valley in 2015 and adjusts to his new surroundings, some of the most detailed Easter eggs can be found. One of the funniest in-jokes comes when Marty walks past the movie theater advertising Jaws 19, featuring a cartoonish cutout of Bruce the Shark. This is not only a sly jab at Hollywood's greedy sequelitis, it's also a reference to Steven Spielberg, who not only directed Jaws, but produced the Back to the Future trilogy through Amblin Entertainment. Look closely and you'll notice the marquee for Jaws 19 reading, "Directed by Max Spielberg." A shout out to Steven's real-life son. Notice the ridiculous tagline. This time, it's really, really personal. a play on Jaws 4, The Revenge's absurd premise and silly marketing hook. Funnier yet, Marty grumbles, "Shark still looks fake," as he walks by, a riff on Spielberg's notorious dissatisfaction with how often Bruce broke down while making Jaws.
Shark still looks fake.
Of course, Leah Thompson, who plays Lorraine, starred in Jaws 3D. As Marty continues to tour Hill Valley in 2015, one of the biggest treasure troves, chock full of Easter eggs, appears in the Blast from the Past antique storefront window. Surrounding the 1950 to 2000 Sports Almanac are several video games and VHS movie boxes for other Universal Pictures releases. There is VHS artwork for National Lampoon's Animal House and Dragnet, the latter of which stars Zemeckis' longtime future collaborator, Tom Hanks. In the bottom left corner, the boxes for the Jaws and Jaws 2 video games can be seen. Both Jaws games were designed by LJN, the company that later produced video games based on Back to the Future Part 2, Part 3, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. To the right of the almanac, a talking plush toy doll of Roger Rabbit stands out as an overt nod to the classic movies Zemeckis made between the first and second Back to the Future movies. Speaking of Roger Rabbit, the actor who voiced the character is Charles Fleischer. Fleischer makes a cameo in the 2015 timeline as the car mechanic who wishes he had bet on the Cubs winning the World Series. Fleischer also plays the 1955 version of the same character and also voices Biff's grandmother, Gertrude, who is heard off screen.
I'm going to get my car, Grandma.
Tell me you're coming back. I'll be here to watch it around my house.
As for future predictions, the movie was 1 year off prophesizing the Cubs' World Series win. In real life, the team won the World Series in 2016, their first victory since 1908. Far harder to spot in the window are two significant links to the original movie. A JVC TV and JVC camcorder can be found, recalling the video camera Marty uses to interview Doc at the start of the first film. Harder yet to find is Marty's classic denim jacket from the first film, replete with the Art in Revolution pin. It can be seen at the top of the screen on the left, behind the "Do Your Thing" sign. Lastly, below the TV set, a bust of JFK can be seen, a reference to the street John F. Kennedy Drive in the original Back to the Future. Speaking of US presidents, an image of Ronald Reagan and his videotape "Stand Up Reagan" can be seen, linking back to the hilarious joke about the actor turned politician in the first movie.
Who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
If the Blast from the Past memorabilia shop wasn't a fun enough challenge, fans have had a field day devouring the cornucopia of juicy Easter eggs inside the Cafe 80s Nostalgia Shop in Hill Valley. First off, the store is the same place as Lou's Cafe in 1955 and Lou's Aerobic Fitness Center in 1985 from the first film, combined to create a futuristic amalgam of both. Secondly, several 80s TV shows are played in the cafe, including Taxi, the sitcom starring Christopher Lloyd, and Family Ties, the sitcom starring Michael J. Fox. Thirdly, notice the extras riding stationary bikes in the cafe, a nod to Lou's Fitness Center in the alternate 1985 timeline. Moments later, when Marty plays the arcade game Wild Gunman, one of the little boys he interacts with is none other than a young Elijah Wood in his first feature film appearance. A Paul Reed Smith electric guitar hanging on the wall above the Wild Gunman game is the same instrument Marty plays later in the film when he riffs on Huey Lewis and the News' Power of Love.
Johnny be good.
In the cafe, the Pepsi menu displays 4 varieties of soda. They include Original, Diet Pepsi, Pepsi Max, and Pepsi Perfect.
All I want is a Pepsi.
Although it didn't exist when the movie was released in 1989, Pepsi Max became a real product introduced in Europe in 1993 and in America in 2007. As for the bizarre video avatars of Michael Jackson, Ronald Reagan, and Ayatollah Khomeini, they're done in a visual style reminiscent of the Max Headroom Show, a 1985 TV faux talk show that was all the rage by the end of the decade. Once Marty and Marty Jr. cross paths in the cafe, one way to tell their identical appearances apart is their eye color. Marty has blue eyes, while Marty Jr. has brown eyes. As Marty Jr. exits Cafe 80s and runs away from Griff, the star car from Universal's 1984 teen sci-fi movie The Last Starfighter can be seen. Parked on 2nd Street, next to Courthouse Square, the black spinner vehicle from Ridley Scott's Blade Runner is also present when Marty evades Griff's goons on the hoverboard. Following the hoverboard chase, Marty passes by the Hill Valley Courthouse. Notice how the clock tower remains broken since it was struck by lightning at 10:04 p.m. in 1955. The ledge on the tower's parapet is also still broken, indicating it has not been fixed since the alternate 1985 timeline that returned Marty home safely. Moments later, when Marty reunites with Doc and picks up his copy of USA Today, several hilarious, easy-to-miss headlines appear briefly. The more amusing ones include Thumb Bandits Strike, Man Killed by Falling Litter, Swiss Terrorist Threat, Shredding for Charity, President Says She's Tired, Pitcher Suspended for Bionic Arm Use, and perhaps the funniest, Jaws Without Bite, suggesting that Jaws 19 wasn't all that toothy this time around. Not for nothing, but the paper also refers to Princess Diana as Queen Diana twice in stories preparing for her visit to Washington, D.C. Once Marty escapes from Biff and Biff obtains the almanac, the movie finds Jennifer at the future McFly house. For the few who don't know, Marty's future daughter, Marlene McFly, is played by Michael J. Fox. After Biff pilfers the DeLorean and goes back to 1985, Doc and Marty follow him to find a much darker, dystopian version of Hill Valley. Using the almanac, Biff has turned a quaint little town into a corrupt, crime-ridden hellscape where gambling has been legalized. Emphasizing how nightmarish this timeline has become, Marty walks past a vandalized welcome sign that reads Hell Valley instead of Hill Valley. Similarly, Marty strolls past Hilldale's welcome sign, which has been spray painted to read the address of suckers instead of the address of success. Parked next to Marty's 2015 house is an old, wrecked 1955 Citroen DS car with a red body and white top. This is the same Luxor taxicab that old Biff used to find the DeLorean, with the colors altered. Once Marty visits George McFly's grave in the Oak Park Cemetery, the tombstone reveals that George was born on April Fool's Day and died on March 15th, the Ides of March, a date most commonly associated with the assassination of Julius Caesar. Whether this is a nod to George being a foolish goofball since birth, and star Crispin Glover backstabbing the production by refusing to appear in the sequel and filing a lawsuit for using his likeness, is anyone's guess. Marty stumbles into Biff's Pleasure Paradise Casino and Museum, which was purposefully patterned after Donald Trump's gaudy gaming parlors. When he wanders into the museum, you'll notice the hilarious, on-brand sign to the left reading, "Smoking Required," with the semiotics suggesting you could be thrown out of the museum for not smoking. Attentive viewers will spot a black and white image of Buford Mad Dog Tannen on a TV monitor in the casino. This is the character Tom Wilson portrays in Back to the Future Part 3. The reason Mad Dog looks slightly different from the way he does in that film is that the image seen in Biff's casino was taken from a makeup test Wilson underwent in pre-production. Not only was Biff's personality modeled after Trump, but the dystopic version of Lorraine was inspired by Tammy Faye Baker, also alluding to the events depicted in Part 3 when Marty confronts Biff in the hot tub. The movie playing on TV is Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars, starring Clint Eastwood. Remember, the opening footage of Back to the Future Part 2 was taken from the Eastwood movie Firefox. In Back to the Future Part 3, Marty uses Clint Eastwood as an alias when he travels to the Old West in 1885. And speaking of movies, Hawk-eyed fans may also notice Biff's kinky pornography fetishes, as a copy of Black Taboo and Playing with Fire can be seen on the counter next to the Penthouse bar as Marty and Lorraine interact. Pretty heavy, I know. In the Dystopian 1985 timeline, Doc holds up a newspaper in his mansion with a large headline reading, "Emmett Brown committed." Much more difficult to see is the headline below to the right reading, "Nixon to seek fifth term, with plans to end the Vietnam War in 1985. The implication being that in this horrific version of a future America, the US president has disregarded the Constitution and sought to stay in power for 20 years. Thankfully, this doesn't sound too familiar in 2025. Okay, so when Marty retrieves the almanac, leaves the terrifying version of 1985, and returns to 1955, a more subtle Easter egg comes as Biff chases Marty through the tunnel. Filmed at Mount Hollywood Tunnel in Griffith Park, this is the same tunnel that functioned as Eddie Valiant's entrance to Toontown and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. One of the most brilliant parts of Back to the Future Part 2 is how it ends in 1955, masterfully recreating the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Filmed from an entirely different perspective, Rashomon style, the events are now seen through Biff's eyes. With new information not provided in the original movie, Biff is seen spiking the punch bowl at the dance with alcohol. Putting two and two together, that means that George McFly, who we saw drink from that very punch bowl in the first movie, was more than likely intoxicated at the dance.
No, Biff. You leave her alone.
Far from an oversight, this makes far more logical sense, as George suddenly found the courage to dance by himself as if no one was watching, and had the nerve to get into a physical altercation with Biff in the parking lot. Food for thought, if nothing else. Another word on the reframed school dance. To accurately recreate the dance, Zemeckis wanted to recycle the original costumes from the original movie. Unfortunately, 2 of the 3 dresses made for Lorraine went missing and couldn't be located during production. Just when Zemeckis was about to freak out, Lea Thompson remembered that she kept one of the dresses in her closet as a souvenir. She's the only one in the cast who wore her original costume from the first film in the sequel. As for Doc's snazzy Hawaiian-style shirt worn throughout most of the movie, it not only turns into his rough-honed bandana in the movie's finale, but it also foretells what Doc and Marty will experience in Back to the Future Part 3. Notice how the shirt features images of a horse being chased by a locomotive in an Old West setting. Remember, Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 were filmed back to back, so this is more of a deliberate story-building clue planted by Zemeckis and fellow screenwriter Bob Gale. So there you have it. Back to the Future Part 2 has no shortage of discoverable Easter eggs, subtle references, hidden clues, and overt homages that tie into the overarching franchise. The movie became the 3rd highest box office earner of 1989, and arguably remains the best second entry in a cinematic trilogy on record.
Folks, it was inevitable. Here we are today to talk about every single notable Easter egg that we found in Back to the Future Part 3. I gotta admit, this has been a fun ride. It's kind of sad to see it all coming to an end, but hopefully you guys are enjoying this, and even more so, hopefully you guys are rewatching these movies and finding these Easter eggs for yourself. It actually does feel kind of bittersweet that it's coming to an end, but I am excited for this because this is the movie that admittedly I have seen the least. However, it's also the one that every single time I do sit down and watch it, I say to myself, why don't I watch this more? You heard that too, right? So folks, sit back, relax, and get on your horse because today we are going to be taking a look at every Easter egg in Back to the Future Part 3. Let's pass it over to Travis and get into it.
Believe it or not, Franchise mainstays Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, and Tom Wilson have all publicly stated that Back to the Future Part 3 is their favorite and most amusing entry in what is still considered one of the greatest cinematic trilogies committed to celluloid. Famously filmed back-to-back with Back to the Future Part 2 during 11 laborious months, director Robert Zemeckis worked tirelessly filming Part 3 while editing Part 2 to ensure that both films would be viewable within 6 months of each other. Of course, with such impeccable attention to detail and diligent efforts to connect all 3 movies at a cellular level,
because one day I'll have you right where I want you in detention. Slacker!
Back to the Future Part 3 has plenty of cool callbacks and nuanced references to its predecessors.
What's wrong, dude? You yellow?
Overt and covert nods to classic movie westerns, and a slew of buried Easter eggs worth excavating as the film celebrates its 35th anniversary this year.
That's it!
Sound good? Great fucking Scott! We're firing up the DeLorean one more time, rushing back to 1885, and discovering all the hidden treasure we can find in Back to the Future Part 3.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so at the end of Back to the Future Part 2, Doc Brown mentions how he always wanted to travel to his favorite historical era, the Old West.
1885! September 1885!
Before Doc travels 70 years into the past and arrives in Hill Valley in 1885, as the town is being built, one of the first Easter egg baskets can be found inside Doc's mansion. Notice the 4 black and white images hanging above the fireplace as the credits roll. These portraits of Isaac Newton, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, and Albert Einstein were hung in the same place in Doc's mansion in the first film's 1955 timeline. Speaking of the original 1955 timeline, when Doc stumbles past a bathroom in the mansion, viewers can spot the clock hanging on the wall above the toilet. This is the same clock that Doc described to Marty when they first met. Remember, Doc tried to hang the clock, but slipped, fell, and hit his head, which gave him the revelation of the flux capacitor and made time travel possible.
And when I came to, I had a revelation, a vision.
Additional iconography from the first 2 films in Doc's mansion can be spotted, including the fire extinguisher Doc used to put out the car model fire, the large brainwave analyzer Doc uses to predict Marty's thoughts, the crude model of Hill Valley, the hoverboard, Doc's saxophone hanging on a pillar, dual wristwatches on Doc's arms, etc.
Pretty heavy, huh?
Perhaps most importantly, the letter Doc wrote is seen drying above the fireplace. Upon visiting the cemetery, Doc and Marty dig up the DeLorean and repair it for Marty to return to 1985. While walking through the underground tunnel, Doc mentions his favorite author, Jules Verne,
Reading my favorite author, Jules Verne,
who famously wrote the book referenced in the movie, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Later, when Doc meets and falls in love with Clara Clayton, a part specifically written for Mary Steenburgen, they get married and have children named Jules and Verne.
Jules and Verne.
Clara also mentions being a fan of H.G. Wells, which recalls Steenburgen's role in the 1979 time travel movie Time After Time, in a story that finds H.G. Wells traveling through time to catch Jack the Ripper. When Clara purchases train tickets, the salesman mentions that San Francisco is the final destination.
How far does the 8 o'clock train go?
San Francisco is the end of the line.
In Time After Time, much of the plot took place in San Francisco. Meanwhile, Clara Clayton is based on Clara Clemens, the daughter of Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, who famously almost lost her life when a horse threw her carriage off a 50-foot cliff, paralleling Clara's near fate in Back to the Future 3. After spotting Doc's tombstone and learning from the inscription that he was shot to death by Biff Tannen's great-grandfather, Buford Mad Dog Tannen, we get our first glimpse at series stalwart Tom Wilson.
But Buford Tannen, for a matter of $80, what kind of a future do you call that?
Fans will recognize Mad Dog from his brief cameo in Back to the Future Part 2 when he appears on a TV screen inside Biff's Pleasure Palace casino. However, Mad Dog's visage is slightly different in Part 2, as the image was taken from a makeup test. As for Mad Dog's physical appearance, Wilson patterned his look after Lee Marvin's title role in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. As we'll see, most of the cinematic references in Back to the Future Part 3 relate to classic westerns, many of which star the legendary Clint Eastwood.
Eastwood. Clint Eastwood.
What kind of stupid name is that?
Remember, Clint Eastwood is the alias Marty uses in 1885, something that pleased the iconic actor after he granted the production permission to use his name. Just before Marty informs Doc of who Clint Eastwood is, the two study old records and photographs.
Clint Eastwood never wore anything like this.
Clint who?
One includes an image of the newly constructed tower clock that appears throughout the franchise. Doc poses next to the clock in the photo, with the time reading 8:08, a sly reference to 88 miles per hour, the speed required for time travel. Later, when Doc and Marty pose for a photo beside the clock reading 8:08, the photographer is played by cinematographer Dean Cundy, who shot all three films in the trilogy. Once Marty vows to rescue Doc from sudden death in 1885, the two soon attend a Pohatchie Drive-In movie theater in 1955 to fix the DeLorean. Marty mentions Clint Eastwood, whose name flies over Doc's head. Clint who?
That's right. You haven't heard of him yet.
Marty, you have to wear the boots.
Just as Marty says that, he points to two movie posters advertised on the wall. The posters he points to are for the 1955 sci-fi B-movies Tarantula and Revenge of the Creature, both of which starred a pre-famous 25-year-old Clint Eastwood. Later, the drive-in marquee advertises a triple feature, including Francis in the Navy, another early Eastwood film released in 1955. This not only ties into the multiple Eastwood references in Back to the Future Part 2, but also lays the groundwork for several more to come in Part 3. For instance, the location used for Hill Valley in 1885 is the same one in Clint Eastwood's 1985 Western Pale Rider. Namely, both movies were filmed at Railtown 1897 State Historic Park, Jamestown, California.
I'll have, ice water?
Ice?
When the clock used for the iconic Hill Valley clock tower is unloaded from the train car in 1885, as Doc and Marty speak to the conductor, sharp-eyed fans will notice that it's the same clock that was unloaded similarly in Pale Rider. Interestingly enough, Pale Rider was the #1 movie at the US box office in July 1985, until it was supplanted by Back to the Future, which went on to become the highest grossing movie of the year.
I'm telling the truth, Doc. You gotta believe me.
A bevy of nods to Eastwood's 1976 Western The Outlaw Josie Wales can be found in the film as well. When Marty is served a drink at the Palace Saloon under the name Clint Eastwood, the actor playing Chester, the bartender, is Matt Clark. Even though Marty asks for ice water, Chester tells him the bar only serves whiskey.
We pour whiskey.
Clark also portrayed Kelly, the bartender, in The Outlaw Josie Wales, in which he tells Clint Eastwood's character that the saloon does not serve whiskey. This is not only a riff on Josie Wales, but also a callback to Marty's difficulty ordering a drink in Lou's Cafe in 1955. It's also worth noting that the Palace Saloon is the same location used for Lou's Cafe in 1955, Lou's Aerobic Fitness Center in 1985, and the Cafe 80s in 2015.
All I want is a Pepsi.
For hardcore Western fans, the three old-timer saloon patrons may look familiar. Rather than casting random bit players, Zemeckis paid homage to the genre by casting Pat Buttram, Harry Carey Jr., and Dub Taylor, three actors who played supporting characters in countless westerns throughout their careers. After Marty leaves the saloon and is roped by Buford's gang, Michael J. Fox was often pulled and dragged off-screen by the Benny the Cab go-kart featured in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the movie Zemeckis made before Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. Finally, the train engineer in Back to the Future 3 is portrayed by Bill McKinney, the same actor who portrayed the villainous Captain Tyrrell in The Outlaw Josie Wales. As for more classic Eastwood Western references, notice how Doc shoots Marty down from Buford's lynching rope in the same manner as Eastwood's Man with No Name does for Tuco in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Speaking of Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, Biff watches a fistful of dollars while in the casino hot tub in Back to the Future Part 2. In the clip shown, Eastwood sports a ramshackle bulletproof vest. Later in Back to the Future Part 3, Marty does the same thing by using an iron stove door to stop a bullet from puncturing his torso. Of course, the sign for Clayton Ravine displayed early in the movie is altered to Eastwood Ravine by the end. Speaking of, when Doc and Marty first mention Clayton Ravine while studying the map at the train station, Clara Clayton can be seen in a hat and a violet dress behind Marty with her back turned.
This map calls Clayton Ravine Shonash Ravine. That must be the old Indian name for it.
Standing beside the tower clock on the train. Notice how the clock reads 10:04. The time the clock tower will be struck by lightning 70 years in the future. Just before that, when Marty first enters Hill Valley's construction in 1885, a sign for a horse trader named Joe Statler is displayed. This refers to the Statler Toyota sign on the pickup truck that Marty ends up with in the first film, and the Statler Motors Studebaker sign spotted on a building by the theater in the second film. In the Back to the Future universe, the Statler family has been a prominent fixture in the automotive business for at least a century. Moments later, Marty strolls past a manure wagon with the name A. Jones stamped on the side. This is an overt nod to the D. Jones sign printed on the side of the manure truck in the original movie, which itself was a shout out to unit production manager Dennis E. Jones. Like the Statlers with transportation, the Joneses have been hauling manure in Hill Valley for 100 years. As Doc begins courting Clara, and he and Marty try different methods to repair the DeLorean, night falls in Hill Valley. Following the fireworks display to celebrate the clock tower's unveiling, a band begins playing festive music. The band is none other than real-life rock band ZZ Top. According to legend, ZZ Top was asked to hang around the set and play music in between shots. When a camera broke and required repair, Michael J. Fox asked the band to play their song, Hey Good Lookin'. The band obliged and played for the cast and crew for the next 2 hours. When asked if the camera was fixed, Zemeckis told them it had been repaired for quite some time, but didn't want to ruin the party-like atmosphere the band created on set. As such, Zemeckis asked ZZ Top to be in the movie, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's got a beat and you can dance to it.
As a funny aside, ZZ Top's manager tried to get the band's famous Cadzilla Cadillac as the time machine in Back to the Future 3. Of course, Zemeckis declined due to the DeLorean. Even so, Cadzilla appears in the Back to the Future 3 themed music video for the ZZ Top song Double Back. Later at night, Marty stumbles past a gun show and demonstrates his quick draw skills, nodding to the Wild Gunman arcade game he played in the Cafe 80s in Part 2. In both instances, the gun is referred to as a baby toy.
Surely you're not afraid to try something that a baby could do.
Once Buford's posse rolls into town, viewers meet Marshall Strickland, played with much more hair by James Tolkien. Strickland emphasizes the word discipline to his son, which refers to the sign on Principal Strickland's office in Part 2. In underscoring the thematic motif of history repeating itself, Strickland and his lineage have been strict disciplinarians in Hill Valley for at least a century. Sticking with Strickland, one of the most significant editorial changes in Back to the Future 3 concerns his demise.
What about Monday? We doing anything Monday? No, Monday'd be fine. You can kill him on Monday. I'll be back this way on Monday.
Originally scripted and filmed was a scene in which Buford shoots Strickland to death in the back. Strickland's death was originally referenced by a lawman set to arrest Buford for the killing. However, the dialogue was altered to Buford Tannen, You're under arrest for robbing the Pine City stage. To hide the redubbed line, the camera cuts to Doc and Marty as the officer states the charge.
Buford Tannen, you're under arrest for robbing the Pine City stage.
In the end, Strickland's death was altered to avoid a dark and depressing reaction from an otherwise enjoyable family film. Speaking of endings, as Doc and Marty hop on the train, fans may notice the bandana Doc wears is made from the same shirt he wore in Part 2. The clothing featured 2 horseback riders chasing a locomotive, hinting at the events to come in Part 3. As for the train track, it's the same one used in High Noon, another affectionate ode to a classic 1950s Western. Meanwhile, the poncho Marty wears as he returns to 1985 is very much inspired by Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, which is noticed by Marty's brother Dave. And one last thing about the ending. When Doc, Clara, and their sons Jules and Vern arrive in 1985 inside the flying, time-traveling train, a strange moment occurs with one of the boys. When Doc tells Marty that the future has not been written yet, the younger, blonde-haired boy can be seen making what appears to be a lewd gesture to the camera. He makes a "come hither" gesture before smiling and pointing directly to his junk, which makes it look like the toddler is soliciting fellatio from the crowd of onlookers, for God's sake. In reality, the boy was signaling to his mother standing off screen that he needed to urinate. Somehow, this oversight was left in the final cut and has been pointed out by several fans as a hilarious rewindable moment. Those are the most notable Easter eggs in Back to the Future Part 3. The 6th highest grossing movie of 1990, the 3rd and final entry, brilliantly concludes what remains arguably the most entertaining movie trilogy ever made. Never mind the short-lived animated series that lasted for 2 seasons, we should all thank our lucky stars that Robert Zemeckis and co-writer Bob Gale have promised never to permit a reboot, sequel, or remake of Back to the Future as long as they're alive. Great fucking Scott indeed.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.